Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. John Riosty, good to see you. Lance Sexton, good to see both of you. I guess we're officially getting into the dog days of summer. I gotta ask Lance, how's your weather in Arkansas?
It is currently 100 degrees at noon, heading toward a high of 104. Got 69% humidity. It's pretty nasty outside.
It's going to be pretty rough here in Southern California. Right? I think our high today is going to be 79. Anyway.
Yeah. Bob, your high, our low is higher than your high.
All right, I can gloat. It's one thing we can gloat about in California. Hey, John, you were mentioning it. Let's go with you. I enjoyed the story, and we're going to go off script a little bit. What's happening in the Senate on Wednesday? You started the story, and I said let's talk about it on the show. What's happening?
I was looking at the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and I want to use their language to the most that I can. They're going to hold a hearing on SBA, and what they call it is opportunities and barriers to entrepreneurship for returning citizens and justice impacted individuals. So I think we'll just say people, SBA serving people who are recently out of prison or have prison incarceration maybe in their background. And I know that without being intimately familiar with the rules, but I know that there are restrictions on that now. In fact, I recall an interview I did right during the early days of PPP with the owners of a bakery, a very popular bakery in Old Town Alexandria, where I used to live, and I know it very well. And I remember speaking to one of the owners, the wife of the couple that owned it, the wife, and she said they found out that they couldn't get a PPP loan because her husband had prison in his background. Obviously, it had been a while, and he's doing very well at the bakery. The bakery's doing very well, but that was a tough blow to them at the time, and they made do with idle. And I haven't followed up since then. So, but I know the bakery is still there. So, so I know that there have been restrictions, and I guess that's what the Senate is going to talk about come Wednesday. And they have a panel that includes the owner of a gym who did go to prison, and the gym's name is Conbody. So he is.
I love it.
Hopefully, at least getting some benefit out of that. It sounds like he is. And it'll be interesting to see what they say. I think this is an issue, again, that will, there'll be support from all sides of the aisle. I don't think anyone is opposed to seeing people, get back into the mainstream of the population and try to do good for themselves.
Well, I think the American tradition has always been redemption and second chances. And Lance, what SBA has done in the past is say, hey, if you are a convicted felon or you have that issue, that answers the character question. Therefore, we're going to assume that all convicted felons have bad character. But Lance, there are exceptions. We all personally know exceptions. The important thing on this, Lance, is if SB loosens the rules, the lender still has control of who they want to lend money to.
Oh, absolutely, Bob. And of course, they could tweak the 912 clearance process. And certainly, I don't want them to put this in the hands of the lenders to make the decision on who would or would not, because there's currently a clearance process, and maybe they change that clearance process to allow some convicted felons who have rehabilitated their life to be able to get an SBA loan. I mean, most lenders would not, the story that John shared, most lenders would not have an issue with a loan to a bakery where they're doing well, and maybe he had a conviction 20 years ago and has done all the right things. But maybe just some tweaks to the clearance process would be what was necessary to address this.
John, do you know the history of how this came about? What type of legislation? Do you know anything else in terms of background of why they're holding this hearing in August?
No, I don't. I know a couple things. I remember, and this was before the change in administration, I remember interviewing the former head of the Office of Capital Access, and I remember that inside SBA, it was a priority then. They're interested in doing what they can, I guess in a prudent way, as Lance talks about, to try and help more people who are coming out of incarceration. And it does seem that it would strike a chord in this administration because there's always been issues that they call disparate impact. That these rules and restrictions, fall heavily on people of color. So I suspect that all it comes together.
But do you see this as a bipartisan? There's support on the Republican side for some of these.
I didn't not as a statement of fact, but more as a prediction. I think
I would vote with you. I would agree with you. Yes.
I think that this will draw attention and consideration, and depending on what they decide to do, support for both sides of the aisle. I don't think there's any legislators that want just a blanket restriction on people coming out of prison from getting SBA loans.
I think if it's a one-off, you made bad judgment, you did your time, you did everything you're supposed to do, and then you come out. Then are you scarred for life, or as you said, do we have a path for redemption? Now we're not talking about recidivism and repeat offenders, but for the percentage that do turn their lives around, whatever we as a society can do to help, I don't see anybody taking the other side of that issue, Lance.
No, I don't. Like I said, I think most lenders would be happy to provide financings to someone who had turned their life around and had a successful small business. So like I said, it may just take a little tweaking of the clearance process, and it would fix it.
I want to talk about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. The GEO issued a report. Nothing really new in this. Delaney, do we have you on? Are you in the wings there? There she is. I hear Mike's clicking. You there, Delaney? Well, maybe not. All right. What this is saying is the GAO, John, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this report, but the numbers are I don't want to impressive, are staggering, are huge. Almost $30 billion was approved by Congress of March of 2021 for restaurant revitalization. The thing that Lance and I have talked about, we've all talked about, is it took a year to get this done, so that was an issue. But the stats were 50% of sales in restaurants were down, 50% of the employees were laid off, 1 in 6 restaurants closed, most of those permanently, and this was needed to revitalize the industry. Now the problem obviously is the fraud, and they're saying there were 30,000 suspicious applications that were denied by SBA. But another 4,000 were able to get through. They flagged them for fraud, and they're saying the agency, quote, isn't taking timely action to address them. I don't know what that means, Lance, other than they got. I don't know what they mean by time. I think that's a cheap shot, but that's me. Go ahead, Lance.
Well, I think the biggest problem with the restaurant revitalization program is it was slow to get money out. And, the restaurants that were struggling, slow was not what they needed. Right. And, in a lot of circumstances, by the time the money was available, they were already too far underwater to recover.
43% had 2019 revenues under $500,000. The medium award was $126,000. So those are definitely entities that needed it. They said 40% of the applicants, they ran out of money. They were not able to obtain funds. And it's interesting. I would like to know some of the backstory on why this was done as a direct loan program and not through the lenders. And it'd be interesting to see what the studies are on which delivery system was more effective. Obviously, Lance and I are biased, but just in the preliminary numbers, I question why they didn't let lenders fund this as they did PPP, Lance.
I think the lenders certainly would have welcomed the opportunity to do it, even though they were overwhelmed by PPP, because, I mean, what lender doesn't have a few restaurant loans in their portfolio? And being able to prop up and help those existing restaurants in their portfolio, I can't imagine a lender that would not have.
Well, the lenders, as we saw with PPP, they had the infrastructure.
I totally agree with both Lance and Bob, and sort of the dichotomy, the thinking, the logic. In 2021, when the administration decided they wanted to help sole proprietors, people, at that level, many of whom had no relationship with banks other than, the basic deposit relationship. They turned that over to the banks, and they did the best they could, and I think they did a good job. But here, with a class of people who had very strong relationships with banks, and banks, had enormous, on the ground knowledge. They decided to do it themselves, and it took. And Bob, you said these terms, but it took a fatally long time for many restaurants.
Absolutely.
To get this program off the ground. And I
considered venue as well, John.
Yeah, I wondered about the logic, and as people look back on PPP and all of the other emergency programs, maybe that will come to light. Maybe I should be asking some of these questions as well. Why was this done in-house, and why was the other the program involving the very small business people and the sole proprietors and others, the Schedule C filers? Why was that handed to banks? Not that that shouldn't have been handed to banks, but I guess why wasn't this handed to banks as well?
Yeah, and to be fair, that's I'm going to correct myself. I don't think that was an SBA decision, Lance. That was a congressional decision. Congress decided how that was. So I'll throw my criticism. I'm critical, but I'll put it back on Congress and take it.
Yeah, I agree as well. And what were they thinking? And I don't mean that in a terrible way, because as you go into this, maybe there was a good reason, but what were they thinking?
Yeah.
Well, it's
go ahead, Lance.
The enormity of all of the pandemic relief programs that SBA rolled out. The only way they could possibly do it efficiently is with their financial institution partners. I just think this program would have worked better had Congress said, hey, let's do this like we did PPP. And again, the financial institutions were overwhelmed with PPP, but financial institutions were concerned with taking care of their customers, which John made a great point. Every one of these restaurants have deposit accounts at banks, even if they don't have a loan.
Yeah, I think most of them, many of them, have relationships, lending credit relationships. So this is the class of business that knows banks, and banks know them.
Let's go to the polls, Joseph. Number one, have you tightened your restaurant lending credit box? Lance, I think we know what the answer is going to be.
I think the challenge, Bob, is it depends on where you are geographically in the United States. Restaurants were impacted differently. For instance, last year we made a trip out to do some recording on the closer training, and the day we got there was the first day that restaurants were open to inside dining. Mm-hmm. And I think it may have shut back down shortly thereafter, but here in Arkansas, They had limited dining for a while. They were shut down briefly, had limited dining, but we're back to in the restaurant dining pretty quickly. So, there are different geographic locations in the country where they got beat up worse. I'm not surprised that everybody has a tight credit box for restaurants, but it's probably tighter now than it's been.
Number 2, will you do a conventional non-SBA commercial restaurant loan at your institution?
I'm hoping this is a real big yes, Bob, because there are incredible restaurants that are well capitalized that have great cash flow.
And that screams, you may disagree with the results, but that screams the need for the SBA program in this particular niche. And restaurants are the number one niche or number one NAICS code for lenders or for SBA lenders.
Absolutely. And the SBA Guarantee Program is a perfect fit for restaurants, not just because of the risk involved, but because of the collateral picture. We talk about credit elsewhere, guys. Restaurants, one of the most difficult things they have in a regular commercial lending policy is meeting the collateral requirements.
Right.
Thus, SBA loans.
This is a great credit elsewhere test or answer. If it's hey, we're doing this because it does not qualify as a conventional loan and it has to be SBA, i.e. that answers the credit elsewhere test. It's a bonus. Yep. Finally, what is the highest charge-off rate by industry for SBA lending?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, Bob. Limited number of real estate developers would in fact be eligible. Yeah, but what is the highest charge-off rate, Bob?
It's restaurants, but trucking's up there. I put in real estate developers just because they are high, but they're usually non-SBA. I threw in exporters there, but the highest is restaurants, and it also is of these 4. There are higher ones such as shrimp boats out of the Gulf of Mexico. I think that was 85%, but there are
shrimp boat loans.
Yeah, another one's on that. John, obviously that doesn't surprise you.
No, first of all, if you just think statistically, the largest block of loans is likely to have the most charge-offs. So,
also by percentage of loans, also. So that's.
Well, the trucking business is a golden area right now. There's a shortage of truckers, truck drivers. Trucking has no issue finding opportunities for income. In fact, guys, we're seeing advertisements for truck drivers for Walmart with pay exceeding $100,000 a year now.
Oh, yeah. And you're driving down the road saying, bonuses, call this number, you're behind the truck. Real quick, please get your BDO nominations in by the end of this week. The cutoff is July 31. And Lance is going to be doing a webinar next Wednesday on SBA screenouts, how to avoid them at there we go. How to avoid them, and B, when you get one, how do you process it, Lance?
Absolutely, Bobby. When we submit GP, like I said last week, you very seldom submit a loan GP without some screenouts. So understanding how to successfully navigate screenouts is very important to a SBA lender.
Hey, both of you, thank you very much for joining us. John, thank you. I know you're very busy. I want to hear more about what's happening on Wednesday. That is of interest to us. And thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today for today's episode. If you like today's content, hit that subscribe button to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon to get notified about our latest videos. Thank you again for joining us today and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Catch you next time.